Hello and welcome to Who Wore It Better, my review Raw and SmackDown back-to-back and try and figure out which show won for the week. I did get to see the UK Championship Tournament 2-night special on the network this week. If you want my thoughts on that event, the review for that is going to go up on the channel later today. When it is up, I'll put the link to it right here in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. But for right now, let's go right into Raw and SmackDown. Raw opens up with Kurt Angle and Constable Corbin in the ring. Angle wants to set the record straight about Brock Lesnar's status when Roman Reigns interrupts, then out comes Bobby Lashley. And the crowd is surprisingly receptive to both. Reigns mocks Lashley for leaving WWE after being in the main event of WrestleMania, which, technically was the biggest match of that WrestleMania, the most hyped match, but if we define main event as last match of the night, that is not the case. Then he also mocks Bobby's MMA career. Yes, he does have a good win-loss record, but it's against a lot of, nobodies in MMA, so there's not much to speak of there. This promo is actually pretty good. I do enjoy the snark and the venom in Roman's voice here in this promo here. Kurt, in the middle of his rant, Kurt cancels the multi-man match for Extreme Rules, saying there's been a snag in Brock Lesnar's contract negotiations. And boy, they really want the fans to hate Lesnar, don't they? It's just, at some point, it just gets kind of ludicrous to how long he's held the belt. It's like, it's something that they know that we know is ridiculous. For comparison, Pete Dunne has held the UK Championship for more than 400 days, and he's actually defended it, Brock Lesnar's defended his title, maybe 10 times. I forget the actual number. I think it's like 10 out of the entire 400 plus days, 440, 50 days or something. He's had the belt. It's ridiculous. They know we know it's ridiculous, and they're just like rubbing it in our faces. I guess the gambit is that once somebody finally does unseat him, it's going to be very cathartic. It's going to be a big deal. And I'm hoping it will be, but how much longer do we have to sit through this before we finally get to that point? Anyway, Roman almost says the S word, then Kurt cuts him off. Lashley disses Roman a bit more, and a match for the two is proposed for Extreme Rules, never officially confirmed just yet. The Revival come out, and they make a challenge for a rematch from last week, and that match is on. Roman takes a lot of the heat in this one. Last week, I don't think he got much offense on him at all from the Revival. This week, that was corrected threefold, I think. It was definitely, he was taking the heat for this one. Just like last week, Roman gets the blind tag. There is some infighting between he and Bobby. In the distraction, Dash rolls up Roman for the Revival to win, which was a huge upset. You kind of expected Bobby and Roman were going to take out the Revival. Again, not so. Every once in a while, 50-50 booking does you a solid, and I'm very interested in seeing again, like I said last week, what they're going to do with the Revival now, because now they've had 2 matches in a row with 2 of the top guys on Raw. They've won one of them, so now, where will you go with this? Obviously, the Raw Tag Title thing is still kind of going on between the Deleters and the B team, but are they next in line? Time will tell. Speaking of which, we get Curtis Axel versus Matt Hardy in singles action here. We get another hilarious parody of Matt and Bray by the B team before the match. Not much to this match because in the first minute and a half or so, Matt goes for a superplex, but Curtis counters it into a crossbody and wins. A kind of a fluke victory in a very short time. We get a stare down, a B team chant. Matt and Bray say that what they did was wonderful, and the B team is very confused. My, what a peculiar build we've had for this matchup here. Before I move on, I do want to talk for a bit about the Hardy Boys documentary on the network, The Hardys Woken. If you haven't seen that, you really should. As good as the commercial for it is, it still doesn't do justice to how good this documentary is. I think what makes this documentary so excellent to watch, not just because of the fact they're using TNA footage, which in and of itself is mind-blowing, but also the fact of how honest they are with Matt and Jeff and their addictions and their downward spirals in the time they weren't with the company. Even when they were with the company, they had this great shot. I don't want to spoil too much, but there's this great shot, very captivating shot of Matt Hardy, just like he's sitting down for this like talking head thing for a DVD they're doing, and he just passes out sitting up in the middle of the thing, and they're rolling on this, and that is just like, whoa, I cannot believe they would show that. I can't believe they would make this public. Like, they're very forthcoming about the demons that the Hardy Boys faced in their downward spiral out of the company and their descent into madness in TNA and their redemption. It is a very, very powerful documentary. There's actually some stuff about that they talk about this that I forgot. Like, I totally forgot about Jeff's DWI that happened right after the ultimate deletion because he was never punished pushed for it, so I was kind of like, oh, I totally forgot about it. But they remind you about that, and they show footage of stuff from like, you know, Matt and Jeff's YouTube stuff when like Jeff is just, you know, whacked out calling out CM Punk. Like, it's a very, again, very powerful documentary. It takes you all over the place, and I think their use of music and editing is very top notch. Again, I'm gushing about this, but if you haven't seen this documentary, go and see it right now. Remember Authors of Pain? Pepperidge Farm remembers, and they're back. After being gone for several weeks, they're finally back on television, and they have a squiggity squash match with local talent Rich and Rex Gibson. They just beat the hell out of these two small guys until Titus Worldwide come out and make the save. AOP walk away, and it looks like we're getting their first, you know, actual feud since coming on to the main roster. And I guess of all the teams, Titus Worldwide is one of them. Backstage, Finn Balor walks into Kurt Angle's office and keeps looking off to the side, like while he's smiling and making jokes. Who is he looking at off camera? Braun walks in, and we get him wanting to team up with Kevin Owens for reasons that are never fully explained, but he wants to team up with Kevin against Finn Balor and Baron Corbin. So it's the same match as last week, but with the ingredients mixed up a little bit. We'll get to that later on. The Raw Women's Champion Alexa Bliss and Mickie James have some words about Nia Jax and Ronda Rousey, rubbing in what happened at Money in the Bank. I did enjoy their repartee with each other. It's like, it was great. I know, I was there. After about a day and a half of talking, Natalya finally interrupts them, fresh off of her reality TV vacation in Lake Tahoe, about an hour from where I'm presently sitting, and she just reminds everyone that Ronda Rousey's coming back in 23 days, and then she's going to have a match with Alexa next, and Nia Jax comes out to even the odds. And I guess Nia is a babyface again. After the healer stuff she was doing in the build for Money in the Bank, she's back and she gets a face pop, and she's a face here. So, you know, what's going on with Nia Jax? I don't even know anymore. Mickie distracts Natalya. Nia returns the favor and distracts Alexa. Natalya wins with the sharpshooter. Mickie James, after the match, cradles Alexa like she is a baby, which is pretty hilarious. I'm wondering at this point if Natalya, since it's going to be Nia and Alexa in a rematch at Extreme Rules, I wonder if Natalya will be inserted into the match itself or otherwise be involved in some fashion, being Nia's corner person or something like that. Not only do the Riot Squad hate snacks, apparently they also hate cameras. They interrupt a photo shoot with Jinder Mahal and Sunil Singh, and they break the dude's camera, which if I were that guy, I would have been a lot more pissed about it than he let on visibly. And then Jinder speaks Punjabi to the girls, and then Sarah Logan looks kind of confused at Jinder for talking, which is probably the most hilarious person to have that reaction, considering Sarah Logan's enunciation problems. The fact that she's confused by what Jinder's saying is pretty hilarious. We get Ember Moon, Bayley, and Sasha Banks in a 6-woman match against the Riot Squad. Kurt Angle says this is Bayley and Sasha's last chance to get along, which, why does he care? What exactly does he care if they don't like each other? Does friendship affect the rankings in the women's division? This line of thinking will drive me crazy later on. Ruby wins the match for her team, then immediately after the match, Bayley just jumps on Sasha and just beats the hell out of her. It's very cathartic, and the fans absolutely love this. But then later on, after the beatdown, Bayley comes into Kurt Angle's office and says, you know, you need to go to counseling next week. I guess you don't care about the women's evolution. Again, what does her beef with Sasha Banks have anything to do with the women's evolution? Is there a requirement they all have to be friends? This shit makes no sense. And like the counseling, when I hear him say counseling, I just get flashbacks to Enzo Amore going to counseling, and Jinder Mahal and Bo Dallas are also there in the background. It just makes no sense, because why would you have to go to counseling for showing aggression in wrestling? Isn't aggression a positive trait to have in wrestling? You had a whole era in your company's history based around that idea. We have a scheduled rematch between Mojo Rawley and No Way Jose, but Mojo just comes out. He berates the Conga Line, in particular a guy named Todd, who looks suspiciously like Spoony. Mojo denies Jose's rematch, then cold cocks him and walks away. I feel like Mojo is kind of in the exact same boat that Baron Corbin was a few weeks ago before becoming the Constable. The segment does end on a "We Want Todd" chant, which made me smile. So we get that Kevin Owens, Braun Strowman versus Finn Balor, Baron Corbin matchup. I guess Corbin just wrestles in his nice clothes now. I hope he has a clothing budget, like a weekly allowance to buy new clothes, because at the rate he's going, think of all the shirts and pants he's at risk of ruining as he wrestles in the ring. Anyways, an unlikely alliance between Kevin and Strowman. Could they become best friends? I think it's possible. There's a lot of reluctant tags between both teams. Like nobody wants to be partners with anybody else in this matchup here. Strowman with the shoulder tackles on the outside. I really wanted to see him like run and almost hit Kevin Owens, then stop himself. Oh, wait. He want to like, so instead he actually tells Kevin to do it himself, and Kevin does the shoulder tackles. He does one of them before he gets cut off by somebody else, but it was a pretty funny moment while that happened. Corbin and Balor are fighting on the outside, and they're tag team partners. They make their way all the way up the stage, and Kevin and Braun win by count out, and Kevin wants to shake hands with Braun, but then he thinks better of it, runs away. Strowman chases after him. He tries to escape, and then it's very reminiscent of like Sid Vicious getting his car crushed by Goldberg in WCW. Some memes have been brought up about this, which is why I make that reference, but Braun flips Kevin's rental car, and I wonder where these two are going. Are we going to get like eventually them forming a bond, become a tag team champions? We've seen stranger alliances. I am very intrigued by this. Main event time for the IC title. It's a rematch between Dolph Ziggler, the champion, and Seth Rollins as a result of the shocker from last week. And holy crap, when's the last time Dolph Ziggler was in the main event of any show? Great stuff by both these guys. They tear it down once again. At one point in the match, Drew McIntyre gets handsy with Seth and gets ejected. They do an apron spot. I don't think they mention at all that's the hardest part of the ring once. So remarkable restraint by the announce team for that one. Superplex into a Falcon Arrow by Seth. McIntyre comes back into the ring and pulls the ref out of the ring. The match ends in a disqualification. It's a shame that a match this good got a downer of a finish like that. Drew and Dolph go for the kill, but then Roman Reigns comes out to make the save, gets a very nice reception, which again is very uncommon, but here in California apparently people love him. So then he makes the save, and Roman and Seth are in the ring together, and that's where the show ends. SmackDown opens up with Miz TV with special guests, the Bludgeon Brothers. Never in a million years I think these guys would do the talk show gimmick, but given the events of last week, it does make some kind of sense. The Miz tries to get out of them why they beat up Daniel Bryan last week in the gauntlet match, but they don't answer him. Miz tries to fill in the blanks and do some exposition on his own. A lot of fans speculate it has a lot to do with Daniel Bryan's like brief stint in the Wyatt family several years ago. I think you're giving the writers way too much credit when you try to explain stuff with that old. Anyway, the Bludgeon Brothers cut Miz off, then Daniel Bryan interrupts and basically throws down the gauntlet. Which of you guys am I going to fight first? Harper answers the challenge. We never get the Bludgeon's official motive, but at this point, do we need one? You know, if the New Day's whole pancake gimmick doesn't end up in some kind of endorsement with Bisquick or Mrs. Butterworth, then I don't even know what to do anymore. Xavier Woods takes on Rusev in singles action. In this match now, the New Day is trying to get word bubbles over. They hold up a word bubble sign saying, ouch, over Rusev's face as he's selling. And, you know, knowing them, they'll probably get that over as well. Good back and forth. Xavier tries to outmaneuver Rusev, but it's all for naught. He gets hit with a Machka kick. Accolade, Rusev wins here on Rusev Day. Rusev cuts a post-match promo against AJ Styles, who is conspicuous in his absence here. So he's going to tear down the house that AJ Styles built. Good stuff from Xavier and Rusev here. Jeff Hardy with another verbose backstage promo before coming out for an open challenge for the US title. They explained on commentary that it was supposed to be Shinsuke Nakamura fighting Jeff this week for the title, but he was not cleared to compete due to an injury on Monday. Surprisingly, not a swerve. I was kind of expecting he'd show up, at the end of the segment and beat down Jeff Hardy. That was not the case. I don't know if that injury is legit or if they saved him for the dark match at the end of the show or what. I haven't seen the results yet for that, but that was just my takeaway from that. Before we get to the match itself, though, backstage we see Naomi and Lana talking, and the cast of Glow on Netflix all stand in a very long line to talk to Naomi and Lana. This is like the worst blocking I've ever seen. It's worse than when you see people standing like this and the TV is like this. That was just that kind of awkward, but magnified because you have this caterpillar of people. It's ridiculous. The actors encouraged Naomi and Lana to work together as a team, and that's the end of it. It was cool of WWE to endorse the Netflix show. That's really cool they did that. Still a very weird segment, very weird blocking. Anyway, who answers Jeff Hardy's open challenge? It's Eric Young of Sanity. It's a nice flashback to TNA. I believe the last time these two fought in a TNA ring was 2016. Young wears down Jeff, and they eventually work their way to a double down. As that happens, the Usos come out from the crowd, and they start fighting with Sanity on the outside in response to last week, and it turns into a big schmoz. The match is thrown out, turns into a six-man tag team matchup here. They're really building Killian Dane up in this segment a lot because he's taking a lot of super kicks before going down near the end of the match. Hardy wins for his team after hitting Alexander Wolf with a swanton, and I think that was kind of a bad call. It's disappointing to have Sanity come in for this start and stop thing they were doing with him on SmackDown, for them to get the promos, then they were gone for a while, then they finally show up, They caused chaos last week. That was fine. Then here in their first official match, they lose clean as a whistle. I guess if someone from that team's going to take the fall, it should be Alexander Wolf. I wouldn't put Eric Young or Killian Dane in that position yet. But man, that's kind of a downer for Sanity to lose their first match on SmackDown. We get Becky Lynch versus Sonya Deville. Becky makes Sonya tap out with the disarm her. I always raise an eyebrow when someone who has an MMA or a submission specialist gimmick makes them tap out to something in wrestling. To me, that always feels like kind of a rib. Be that as it may, though, it was a pretty good match. We get a cell phone promo with Andrade Cien Almas and Zelina Vega, and Zelina says, 3 weeks ago, we put Sin Cara on the shelf. Well, what happened to the match they advertised 3 weeks ago that never happened? Was this what you're talking about? Something that happened at a house show? You just didn't tell us? To me, it just felt like kind of a slapdash way to remind people that Almas is there, but you're ignoring the fact that the internet never forgets. It's James Ellsworth time. He calls out Asuka. I was half expecting Carmella to come out dressed as Asuka, kind of like returning the favor when James did it at Money in the Bank. But instead, Paige comes out. She announces that Carmella will be defending the title against Asuka at Extreme Rules. And then Ellsworth hits on Paige. Paige goes along with it for a second, but turns it on him and says that next week, Ellsworth is fighting Asuka in some intergender action. I feel like, one day, I think we're going to get to that point where you can have intergender wrestling treated seriously in the company. But for right now, it's like, I think they just brought Ellsworth back for an excuse to do intergender matches with kind of comedy involved, where, the ladies can beat up the men and have it be done for comedy purposes. But it can be done in a legitimate, like, athletic competition setting. It's been done before. It's been proven you can do that. And one day they'll get there. But right now they're not. Main event time as Daniel Bryan takes on Harper. A very strong match here between these two. It ends in a DQ though when Daniel gets Harper in the yes lock and Rowan runs in and stomps on him. The Bludgeon Brothers are ready to destroy Daniel, but then out comes mayoral candidate Kane. He makes the save and Team Hell No reunites and gets this huge pop after Kane and Daniel hug it out. It was a pretty cool moment. Paige pops out just before the show ends and announces that the Bludgeon Brothers will defend the SmackDown tag titles against Team Hell No at Extreme Rules. I'm excited, but at the same time, what year is it? Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, Raw or SmackDown. And this week, I'm going to go with Raw once again. Now, I'm sure some of you will give me flack for this in the comment section, but please hear me out. I think both shows did a really strong job this week. I think SmackDown especially deserves some credit for accomplishing a fair amount with a fairly stripped-down roster. You didn't have either of your main champions in AJ Styles or Carmella. You didn't have Shinsuke. You didn't have Asuka. You're missing out a lot of people that make the show a lot more interesting. The biggest moment of SmackDown this week was Team Hell No reuniting, and as fun as that was to see, I'm far more interested in seeing where Braun and Kevin Owens are going instead. One of the biggest things I thought that SmackDown got wrong this week was having Sanity lose their first match. I thought it was a very bad call. The stuff with Roman and Bobby Lashley on Raw is getting interesting this week after seeing some like fire and venom in Roman Reigns' voice. It helps the crowd was actually getting into it as well. Dolph and Rollins was the match of the week. The UK stuff excluded, and again, you'll see that in my UK review. Bayley snapping was very cathartic, both for the fans live and I'm sure for many people watching at home, but I am not looking forward to next week's counseling session. That might be, if the history of segments with Bayley is any indication, and the history of counseling sessions, like most recent history, is any indication, I'm not looking forward to Raw next week, but that is for next week. Some people, I'm sure, get upset because they think I have a Raw bias, but if that were the case, then why is SmackDown always ahead in overall score? I think, I think the meat of this show, I think what people come to this segment to watch is not necessarily who I pick ultimately every week. That's just kind of superfluous. It's more just my analysis every week of Raw and SmackDown. If people really get that mad about the shows I pick on either side of the same coin, maybe you just have a SmackDown bias. I don't know. I'm just busting y'all's balls. Let me know what you guys thought about Raw and SmackDown in the comment section below, and be sure to vote which show you thought was better in the gimmick in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, buy the t-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com, and check out Patreon.com for exclusive perks and bonus content. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.